The take has developed to the point now where I would say Drake Maye is the best quarterback prospect in this year's class. And I might even say, Trenny, that Jayden Daniels is the better player right now. But in terms of a quarterback prospect, might be difficult for somebody like Andy to understand.
I'm making eyes.
The better player right now doesn't make you the best prospect. The best prospect factors in upside, it factors in ceiling, it factors in development. Drake Maye's 21 years old. He has the height, he has the athleticism, he has the ability to throw off platform. All of these things, I think, make him a better prospect than Jayden Daniels. If you had to play a game tomorrow, Jayden Daniels might give you the better chance to win. But that's not what the draft is about. The draft is about taking someone that you can build your team around, especially number 3 overall, especially with this quarterback position. And I start with the physical ability. When you look at the best quarterbacks in today's game, big guys who can throw on the move with rocket arms. And that is the very baseline, very surface level analysis that I can provide right now, where I can look at Drake Maye and say, that guy has it, whereas Jayden Daniels, the counter to this argument that we've been talking about for months, it feels like, is more of an outlier. There ain't many quarterbacks in the NFL who are hovering around 200 pounds that are having a lot of success, long-term success, especially at that position. So for me, today, and this is going to maintain, and this is going to continue
next week
to
or
be
next month.
my take, Andy, till we get to the draft. But to me, Drake Maye is the better quarterback prospect, and he would be my first choice, not only over Jayden Daniels, but over Caleb Williams as well.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. That right there, what you heard was me on Early Edition earlier this week, talking about why I feel as though Drake Maye is the best quarterback prospect in the 2024 draft. Player versus prospect. There's some nuance there, but I do believe he would be the best fit for the Patriots, really for any team that needs a long-term solution at that position in this year's draft class. And the reason I wanted to start with that clip from TV is because in that clip and in our podcast on Next Pats from earlier this week, what I really zeroed in on when it comes to Maye are the physical characteristics that make him the prospect that he is, primarily, in my opinion. Big body, big arm, big athlete. You start there and you work your way down. But those traits are traits worth betting on. And fresh off our prototypical Patriots quarterbacks list, traits seem to matter for people from this Ron Wolf executive tree. So you take the quarterbacks that those executives had invested in, you take the quarterbacks that are having the most success in the league right now, really aside from Lamar Jackson, who to me is one of one, at least in today's game. Maybe you could point to Michael Vick. You could go all the way back to Randall Cunningham, who I know is Herm Edwards' comp for Jayden Daniels. Funny enough, for guys that would certainly be worthy of the number 3 overall pick who play that style of football. But for the most part, big body, big arm, big athlete, or athletic enough to be able to move, make a man miss, extend plays, and create down the field. Patrick Mahomes, he's not as tall as somebody like Justin Herbert or Josh Allen or Drake Maye, but he's heavy enough to be able to withstand hits, which I think matters when it comes to that position. So the physical matters. I'm on record saying that. I'm on record believing that that has significant importance. But there's more to Maye's game than maybe that clip from Early Edition or the podcast earlier this week or some of our analysis earlier this offseason. There's an analytical argument to drafting Drake Maye. And yes, of course, the arm strength helps his performance when it comes to some of the numbers that front offices may be looking at if they're considering quarterbacks in this year's draft. So the physical helps lead to the analytical success. But I just wanted to highlight some of those things here, and then we're going to get to a conversation, perfect person to have on when we're getting into the analytical aspects of playing this position and other positions. It's Cynthia Frelund of NFL Media. She is their analytics guru and does a phenomenal job of tracking all things NFL, but especially this time of year, prospects in the draft, and using a variety of different means to illustrate for us how successful these young players might be at the next level. Not only does she have access to a ton of data that helps her create her models from which she's working, but she can use computer vision tracking data, which is really fascinating to me because I don't know if there's anybody in the big draft media space, at least, that's using anything similar to that. And so she gives us a unique perspective. So it'll be a lot of fun for you, I hope, to hear from her. And our conversation actually happened back at the Combine, one of many Combine interviews that we're able to stash away, drop at the right time. This is the right time to talk with Cynthia, because we talk a lot about Drake Maye. She had Drake Maye going to the Patriots in her mock draft that she released earlier this offseason. And so she has a lot in terms of what the computer vision tracking data tells us about what kind of player Drake Maye is. But first, let me give you just a couple of numbers here and a couple of quick comps, and we'll do our own little version of, we're talking analytics here. There is some text analytics work out there that will be done, I'm sure, later in the draft process. This is something I've heard Eric Eager, friend of the podcast, talk about in the past, where you're actually using the text from scouting reports and you're comparing one against many others from previous scouting reports and previous draft classes. And you're scanning the text for certain descriptor words that can help us compare one player against another. So we'll get to my own little, very rudimentary, very surface level text analysis, if you will, in a minute here. But just first going to hit you with a couple quick numbers as they relate to Drake Maye. In his game, again, physical traits are one thing. How does he play? Well, one of the things he does really, really well is attack the middle of the field, which are, by a lot of different metrics, some of the most efficient throws in football. He, of course, has the arm strength to push it to the boundary the way that he needs to, the way that the Patriots really have needed to in the last couple of years, but they haven't, whether it's because of Mac Jones's arm strength or because they haven't had the people to win on the outside. They have really been hurt by their inability to attack the sidelines. Maye certainly has the physical capability to do that, but our friend Steve Palazzolo, Pro Football Focus, tweeted back in December as he was studying these quarterbacks initially that Drake Maye might be the best middle of the field passer coming into the league that he's ever seen, that he's ever studied. He had a 94.8 Pro Football Focus passing grade on throws between the hashes, which led all FBS quarterbacks with at least 50 attempts. And you're going to hear from Cynthia talk about how he layers throws, how he's able to change speeds on his throws, especially to the intermediate area, into the middle of the field, where you have to decide in real time, how am I going to get it up over the linebacker and in front of the safety? Or on this seam route, do I want to put some air under it in order to give my receiver the best opportunity to catch it? Or do I have to put it right on his body and throw this thing on a line? He has the ability to use a variety of different tools in his tool belt or clubs in his bag to be able to pick the right throw at the right time. And that, to me, is a really critical skill to be able to have success at the NFL level. There are quarterbacks that we've seen, whether it's Russell Wilson not wanting to attack the middle of the field and that making life a little bit easier on defenses, especially over the course of the last couple of years, that are trying to defend him. Jalen Hurts is something that he has struggled with in the past as well. Now, is their reluctance to attack the middle of the field at times related to their size? It might be. Drake Maye is a taller player. Maybe he sees the field a little bit better than most. But having all areas of the field truly accessible to you as a quarterback is supremely important. Drake Maye, in my opinion, has that, more willing to attack the middle of the field than even somebody like Jaden Daniels, who I think has the ability to make just about every throw. But to me, Drake Maye has more arm talent in the stronger arm than Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is probably more refined and a cleaner mechanically passer. But when you're playing in the Northeast, big arm and the willingness to attack the middle of the field that Maye has, I think that's something that sets him apart. A couple more quick numbers for you before we get into our text analysis. I'm laughing as I say that because the text analysis and the text analytics that you're going to see, in my opinion, I'll do my best to ferret these out. These studies, as they're being done later in the draft process, are much more exhaustive than what I've done. We'll get to that in a second. A couple more numbers for you here. Big time throws. Drake Maye had more big time throws. You heard Trevor Sikkema say this from Pro Football Focus earlier this week on Expats. More big time throws than any quarterback over the course of the last 2 years. And yet, his turnover-worthy throw rate was still just 1.9%, which was 7th in college football. Jaden Daniels, who I have praised and lauded, and he is tremendous at taking care of the football. That's something that I've pointed out every time I talk about Jaden Daniels, and why, one of the reasons why he's worthy of that 3rd overall pick. If he ends up being the quarterback to fall to the Patriots at 3, I would take him there, even if I have Maye as the better prospect. But Jaden Daniels' turnover worthy throw rate was 1.6%. So 1.9 to 1.6. Borderline negligible difference there. His big time throw, now we're back to Maye. Maye's big time throw percentage, his big time throw rate was 7.5%, which was 8th in college football. So in terms of the volume of big time throws, had more than anybody else over the course of the last 2 years. If you want to look at just last year alone, big time throw rate still 7.5%. Last year, by all accounts, not as good a year for Drake Maye. Lesser personnel around him, change in the offense, which the NFL, I know, was not a big fan of in terms of teams that have studied Maye to this point. And yet still that big time throw percentage is pretty high. 8th in college football at 7.5%. Just as a quick aside, because I think in terms of how they win, there are some similarities between CJ Stroud, who had a tremendous rookie year, we know, for the Houston Texans, and Maye. Stroud's big time throw percentage, his final year at Ohio State, was 7.0. So a tick below Maye's 7.5. And his turnover worthy play percentage, Stroud's now, turnover worthy play percentage was 3.6 compared to Maye's 1.9. Now, the scouting on Stroud at the time was, again, great middle of the field thrower. But some of those middle of the field throws invited danger. 3.6 turnover worthy play percentage. And that's playing for a pretty good Ohio State team. Way more talent than what Drake Maye is dealing with at North Carolina. So just something to point out there. That's one quick comparison. Now let's get to our other comps when it comes to the text. So some of the scouting reports that we've seen, and I'm digging specifically into the work of Daniel Jeremiah, friend of the podcast, another friend of the pod here. Somebody who's really well respected, somebody who's worked in the league, somebody who's now worked in this space, the media space, for some time, and we can go back several years and compare his scouting reports for his top 50 players or his top 150 against players in this year's class. What is he saying about Drake Maye this year versus what did he say about Josh Allen in 2017 or Justin Herbert or Jordan Love in 2020? I find that really interesting because those are 3 good players that I just mentioned that established themselves in the league. Josh Allen for sure. Jordan Love, one really good year in Green Bay after multiple years to marinate. Justin Herbert gets thrust in much earlier in his career, but is widely considered one of the 7 or 8, if not higher, quarterbacks in football. All of these guys, big bodies, good athletes, good arms. So the physical part of it, again, that I think really matters in today's game is there. But how were they scouted by Daniel Jeremiah? Here's Daniel Jeremiah on Drake Maye. Maye, by the way, is his 2nd quarterback behind Caleb Williams and his 5th overall prospect in this year's class. Quote, Maye has prototypical size, athleticism, and arm strength. He has quick feet and quick hands. That's his first line on Drake Maye. His first line on Josh Allen, who, by the way, was his 4th quarterback in 2017 and his 16th player overall. Quote, Allen has ideal size, arm strength, and mobility. He has quick feet in his setup. Pretty similar there. Here's Jordan Love's first line from Daniel Jeremiah. Jordan Love was DJ's 3rd quarterback in 2020 and his 18th overall player, ranked slightly ahead of Justin Herbert. But here's Jordan Love from DJ. Quote, Love has ideal size, arm strength, and athletic ability. First line for all 3 players, size, arm, athletic. Start there. Really good place to start for Drake Maye. When it comes to arm strength, for Maye, here's how DJ described it. He's a gifted thrower who drives the ball without much foot space in the pocket, including with defenders hanging on him. For Josh Allen, Daniel Jeremiah says he generates outrageous velocity and can squeeze the ball into very tight windows. And for Jordan Love, he says the ball jumps out of his hand. He is at his best on skinny post drive throws and over-the-top deep balls. So similar there. Allen stands apart in terms of Jeremiah's description of outrageous velocity. Maye might not be quite on that level, but he is a quote unquote gifted thrower, according to Jeremiah. Now, how about what DJ had to say about these players as athletes and their ability to move? On Maye, he says he is athletic to escape and create with his legs, and he's tough to tackle in space. He's ultra competitive as a runner. On Allen's combination of athleticism and strength allows him to avoid free rushers and shake off tacklers. He's an aggressive runner, and he's been effective on design quarterback runs as well as scrambles. Relatively similar there. Strength, good athlete, the aggression and the competitiveness, with which these guys run. Love, not so much. And that is played out basically with the year that Love just had. He's not the scrambling threat that somebody like Josh Allen is. But he did point out for the Jordan Love scouting report, DJ did back in 2020, quote, he uses his athletic ability to escape and extend plays, but there are occasions when he fails to climb and reset his feet. All right, let's get to the overall assessment from Daniel Jeremiah on all three of these guys, because he does a good job for just about every prospect and quarterback specifically. The last line is sort of a summation of what these guys can do. So here's his summation for Maye. Overall, Maye has some things to clean up, but he has every ingredient to be a top-tier starter at the game's most important position. So acknowledging his warts in terms of some of the lack of polish, some of the decision-making, but he has the traits. He has every ingredient. Here's DJ on Allen. Allen isn't a finished product, but he offers unlimited upside, provided his drafting team exercises patience. So again, maybe more extreme. And I wonder if DJ didn't have an opportunity to go back and re-rank that 2017 class. And he looks at some of the descriptive words that he uses. Unlimited upside, outrageous velocity. He clearly is on the highest end of the spectrum when it comes to the traits. And I would say that's part of the reason why I'm reluctant to, me personally, compare one for one Maye to Allen, because I think as a thrower, Allen has him. And I think even as a runner, they're a little bit closer, but Allen's, to me, based on what I've seen, probably a better runner just in terms of his athleticism and his size. To me, Drake Maye does fight through tackles and he's competitive and he's a large human being, and he'll be bigger in a couple of years. He's 225-ish now. I would expect that number goes up and up and up in a good way the deeper he gets into his career. But I wonder if DJ wouldn't have Allen sort of where he has Maye in terms of his quarterback ranking and his overall ranking, if he just rereads some of the things that he wrote about Allen at the time. Okay, last bit. Here's his summation of Jordan Love. Overall, Love is a raw prospect who needs some time to develop. There is risk with him, but the payoff could be huge. Similar assessments of all these guys, right? The physical traits are obvious and they are there. They might need time. They aren't finished products, But the payoff. At that position, you're talking about where Josh Allen is right now, where Jordan Love, I think, will be next year after the way he finished this past season, and where Drake Maye potentially could end up is as a lock-it-in top 10 quarterback in the league. You can see it. You can hear it. You can read it in some of these scouting reports from somebody like Daniel Jeremiah. Again, hopefully we'll have an even more in-depth text analysis, whether it's from Eric Eager or from anybody else, digging through whether it's Daniel Jeremiah's scouting reports or Dane Brugler's. Obviously, Dane, friend of the pod. Let's just keep throwing it out. I'm just name dropping like crazy today. But these guys are so smart. It's hard for me not to. And so plugged in. Dane is somebody like Dane is where he's talking to scouts. He's talking to executives about how they see these people. And his backlog of scouting reports goes back even further than Dane Jeremiah's in terms of what's out there in the media space. That you can get pretty specific in terms of how some of these people are talking about some of these prospects. And so it'll be really interesting to see what kind of comps we can draw when it comes to Drake Maye's assessment as we get closer and closer to the draft. You might be wondering why I didn't bring up Patrick Mahomes in this discussion, because he, bigger body, he's 6'2", so he's kind of right on the line there in terms of height, but 220 plus pounds coming in to the NFL out of Texas Tech. Big arm, the athleticism to move around and extend plays. For Daniel Jeremiah, and I know he said this publicly, so I'm not outing him in any way, but he has said in the past, boy, I wish people would forget my pre-draft assessment of Patrick Mahomes, because unless he had a late change before the draft, Patrick Mahomes didn't make Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 players, believe it or not, for the 2017 draft. It just goes to show, for an incredibly bright guy like Daniel Jeremiah, who has such a great track record, in my opinion, of being able to assess what these prospects will be. Nobody's perfect in this space. And it just tells you what an inexact science this whole thing is. It's part of the reason it's fun. You know who we had some fun with at the Combine? It was Cynthia Frelund. She was tremendous in terms of breaking down how she is looking at these players, everybody from offensive linemen to quarterbacks. Again, she has her own mock draft. It's on NFL.com right now. She published this thing in February. I don't know if she'll have another before the draft arrives, but so much of what she does is based on the tape itself and being able to track player movements, break down some of their non-back of the football card statistics to be able to assess what they might be at the next level. But she does a fantastic, fantastic job of giving us so much information in this conversation. I think you're going to love it. I think you're going to really appreciate the Maye analysis specifically, because it's not something you've heard other places. So great guest for us to have. Hopefully you enjoy this conversation with Cynthia Frelund.
Very excited now to have with us on the Next Pats podcast, Cynthia Frelund, analytics expert for NFL Network. Cynthia, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're a
and
boss.
You nailed my title too. That was great.
Well,
I got it because analytics analyst is very hard to say. So just to call me an analytics expert makes it easier.
I never would have been able to do that. It's easy for me to remember things that I'm told 15 seconds ago.
Perfect.
But that's all I remember. It's a problem. I remember you're a Boston College grad, a biology major.
Use
and
that
now,
all the time.
Somehow, I was just going to say, maybe you do, though, because we were just talking off air, and the first thing I want to ask you is the Combine for you and studying how these guys move. This is something that you're very into, and using technology to help you understand how these players move and how it might project to the NFL level. Can you tell us about some of the things you're using to best analyze these prospects that are here in Indy?
Well, we'll start from the trenches because, that's how we have to build, right?
Of course.
But ultimately, the offensive linemen, I actually did my master's thesis on this. Like, you can measure their center of gravity by measuring their hips, their knees, their ankles, the flexion in their back, and then you can track that to what happens in the first 10 split of their 40. And that helps project for who will be a waist bender, meaning a guy who gets unfavorable leverage, versus who won't be a waist bender, which is what you want protecting your quarterback.
Okay, so biology major, studying how people move. This all makes sense, right?
Great.
You've made
Yes,
these connections.
exactly.
Master's thesis. Do you have any idea as to which guys might end up performing best when it comes to that sort of thing? Because, listen, in New England right now, we're talking a lot about quarterbacks. We're talking a lot about receivers. They need tackles too. And so is there anybody that you can look at in terms of the game tape and study some of these things you're talking about?
Well, as with everything, like the game tape tells you way more than any of these combine metrics do. This is refinements for especially offensive linemen that are a lot to do with, like, okay, now you've had about 3-4 months of professional level. Now you've been training, because you want to put everyone on the same, like, not everyone went to Alabama. Some people went to places where there isn't as great of a training table. So now you've had several months, you train with your agent, you come here. So that's why I measure it here as well. But their game film, like Joe All, the left tackle from Notre Dame, that guy's, he's also very young, which is good. Young is good because then your knees are in better shape. Knees are a hard thing. You also want to look at how far apart a guy's legs are when they laterally move. If they're too close together, you're more tippy, right? Like you're like a weeble.
Yeah, that's basically my life. Yes, very top heavy.
No,
Bad balance.
but those are the ways to kind of, at least as like a when you're watching at home, when you don't even need computer vision to do it, right? Like this fancy program that kind of looks like the yellow first down line, it imposes these shapes on the field so you can measure things. You can just watch it by, look at how far apart their feet are. But Joe Alt's really good.
Well, and I know that you think Joe Alt is really good because I read your mock draft, and we love your mock draft. Go find it on NFL.com right now if you haven't already, dear listeners, because you are providing new ideas into this mock draft ether that is dominating the NFL landscape between now and the draft itself. You have draft takes that are different from what a lot of people have, and Joe Alt was your number one overall pick, I guess, because of these rare traits you're talking about.
Rare traits, especially youth. Also, if you look at what the Bears actually need right now, before we know what they're doing with Justin Fields, anything. And by the way, in my mock draft, I'm not allowed to make trades. So that's a major caveat, because obviously if you were the Bears, you would trade down, because obviously. But when I'm looking at what valuable assets you could have to your team, especially on a rookie contract, a tackle is absolutely like right up there in those 5 premium positions: your quarterback, tackle, pass rusher, corner, and your wide receiver. So you want to get obviously the best one there, but he's in good shape to be my number 1 tackle.
You have Drake Maye going to the Patriots at 3 overall.
I do.
Why?
Drake Maye's, so it's interesting because we're here at the Combine, like going into, I think, Caleb Williams consensus number 1 by most people's mock drafts. But by the way, we do mock draft differently because I don't want to like do it the same way as everyone. Like, you can go read someone else's. Like, I'm not going to go call an insider and be like, hey, you want to tell me who you're drafting already? No.
We need fresh takes.
Exactly. So Drake Maye's tape showed that in college, he didn't have the best separators, so his receivers weren't as reliable as some other quarterbacks who are in this draft. And with that, he was able to adjust his throwing speed at a rate that was very premium, elite. That translates good to the next level. Wow, that was bad English. That translates well to the next level.
Bio major. It's okay.
I know, I do math, not any of that other stuff. But that translates well because you have to adjust to the game speed of the NFL. And you're not necessarily going to be like just throwing bombs down the field. You need to also adjust your speeds for intermediate throws, which is where Drake Maye really excelled, and also shorter throws, which do actually matter. You can't rifle it too short to someone, they won't be able to catch it.
Is this something that you can track going backwards? Like, can you look at Joe Burrow, for instance, from a handful of years ago and say
it again.
Oh boy.
Your accent came out.
Joe Burrow from a handful of years ago, dude. He's a wicked good quarterback, and can he also vary his speeds throwing at T. Higgins and Jamar Chase?
Every year, a few unfortunate Boston College kids get hit by the T. Anyways, that's all I got.
You did that exact same. You've got that line down pat. You did the exact same line for us last year.
Exactly.
Super Bowl.
It's kind of my go-to.
It's very good.
It's the only thing I've got. But no, that's the whole way you do a model is you take historical data points and then you measure this year versus the past years to get sort of a bit of a trajectory. I don't like comps because nothing's ever exactly the same, but you want like people whose trajectory are up and to the right, getting better. And you can see by using historical data, like how did Joe Burrow throw to all of his different receivers in college at every different level, and then what happened in his first few seasons. So first, you got to take at least half a season worth of games to be able to get to that like sort of next level of who this quarterback is.
I'm curious if your model dings Jaden Daniels at all, because you just mentioned how Drake Maye didn't necessarily have the best route runners, the talent around him that matters when it comes to the evaluation. Jaden Daniels had 2 first-round picks to throw to. Does that hurt him when it comes to your analysis?
No, because he was very good at adjusting to where they were as well, right? Like it's trajectories. It's like, how was he last year versus this year? How's the growth looking? And when you're looking at like Malik Neighbors route running, etc., they asked him to do a variety of different things. It wasn't like, some guys are like one-trick ponies. They don't have the full route tree. The better that you can throw to the full route tree is great. So it's, if someone's got one great thing and you just keep going to it, not as helpful for the quarterback projection as if they have many, and the LSU had many.
Is he as athletic as he looks? We'll not have the opportunity to see him test here in Indy, it sounds. I don't know if he's going to run at his pro day. Oftentimes, some of these most athletic quarterbacks, it feels like, end up don't running a 40. It looks like he's extremely fast. Is there a way for you to track that and then project, okay, he's going to be able to bring X value to the table to the next team that he plays for because he is that athletic? So
there's kind of 2 ways to look at it. There's some things that are like, does he reach a threshold? Does he fall within the acceptable range of things? And the answer is like, he's very fast. He falls within like, I think I don't have it in front of me, like top 85th. So very good percentile in terms of efficiency with his speed. So burst, how fast he can sustain, what happens after 10 yards, etc. So very, very athletic in that regard. So he checks that box. He more than checks that box. There's diminishing returns. Like as long as you're in the 60th or better percentile, diminishing returns to be 60 and 80th on some of those things, unfortunately. But then on others, it's like, well, does my O-line protect? Like I think about the Bills O-line, they're very spread out. Josh Allen can then run and maneuver however he wants. That works for him. Well, other teams use a much more compressed formation, like the Niners this year. They kept Brock Purdy away from pressure. So do I have the right other pieces around me to do what this quarterback does well?
It's really interesting that you bring that up because I never thought of that before in terms of if you just reach a certain threshold athletically, like Patrick Mahomes is not a 4.3 40 guy, but is there a more efficient
Didn't he tweet that he didn't want?
in the
No,
league?
There's not. And throwing
Kyler
off
Murray's
platform,
way faster, but who's the better runner as a quarterback? I think you could make the argument it's actually Mahomes.
And throwing off platform, I mean, Mahomes changed the entire game. Now everyone's expected to be able to throw, meaning not fully set on your balanced on your correct throwing stance. If you can't do that now, you're considered way, way, way pushed down in terms of draft prospect.
Is that one reason why? This is the last question I'll ask you.
Oh, you
Is
ask
that
me
one
that.
reason why Drake Maye might project slightly better for you? Because one thing that I've heard, talking to a few league people, is that if Jaden Daniels is scrambling, he's scrambling to run usually, and you get it. He's that explosive. He's that fast. If there's a 60-yard gain for him available, go for it. Whereas Drake Maye is, it looks like at least, more of this off-platform arm talent, and so maybe there are avenues for him to have success at the next level that aren't necessarily as available to Jaden Daniels. Are you seeing that in the analysis that you've done?
My stuff loves the running aspect of Jaden Daniels a lot, which kind of overshadows some of the other things that could be. But my stuff likes Drake Maye even more than that because his ability to adjust, not just so running, throwing, speeds. He's got great body. I would say overall his body control is very, very strong, which leads to a higher projection for me than Jaden Daniels.
Really interesting. Okay.
Nerdy.
Again,
Nerdy.
no, but this is what we need around this time of year. If we're going to be talking about quarterbacks, Cynthia, for 2.5 months,
Forever,
we need as many opinions
Yeah.
and perspectives on these guys as humanly possible.
I actually, to me, the Patriots hold such a powerful position in this entire draft because their decisions are, maybe it's better for them to pretend they want to take a quarterback and then, get a free agent and then trade down, right?
Right.
I don't know. That is for people way beyond my pay grade to, figure out, but they could change the entire cadence for literally everyone except for the two picking ahead of them.
Cynthia Frelund, NFL Network, analytics expert. We appreciate you. We're going to be looking for waist benders at the Combine.
All right, great stuff there from Cynthia. Really appreciate her giving us some time at the Combine a few weeks ago. Really appreciate the Skull Crusher, John Henry. Really appreciate you all for listening and watching. If you're watching us on YouTube, please leave us a comment. Leave us a comment if you are listening on Apple Podcasts. Rate, subscribe, tell your friends. We, of course, appreciate each and every one of you. We're going to continue to hit you with 2 pods a week for the foreseeable future until we get to draft week. It's been a lot of fun being able to unload some of these conversations on you all as we get closer and closer to the draft. We got some great ones lined up for next week. We're going to be heavy on the offensive line. No pun intended, but we're going to be heavy on the offensive line next week. So we got some great offensive linemen joining the pod. We're going to have our prototypical Patriots along the offensive line to share with you all. So keep an eye out for that next week. We'll talk to you then.